harsh, brutal, and vicious occupation, supported unilaterally by the United States, constant terror and atrocities.
Hold on.
Suppose Palestinians say, well, we're under terrorist attack for 35 years, therefore we have a right to carry out suicide bombings.
Which is what they say.
Do you accept this? Does anybody accept it?
Nobody accepts
All
it.
right, then how come everyone accepts the Israeli claim to be doing it, which is a much weaker claim? Because after all, there's no symmetry in this situation. They are the military occupiers. Palestine isn't occupying Israel. And this isn't just started now. It's going on years ago. I mean...
So does that, in your mind, justify
no,
the
it does not.
bomb?
Of course not.
It
doesn't in anybody's
mind. So it
mind.
invalidates both sides.
Those who defend suicide bombing, and there are very few, don't have a leg to stand on. Those who defend the Israeli atrocities, including the U.S. government, most intellectual opinion, a good bit of the West generally, yeah, they don't have a leg to stand on either, and they have a much weaker position. For 35 years, there has been a harsh, brutal, miserable military occupation. There has not been a political settlement. The reason why there has not been a political settlement is that the United States unilaterally has blocked it for 25 years. Is it supported by the entire world, including the majority of the American people? The answer to that question is yes. There is a political settlement that has been supported by virtually the entire world, including the Arab states, the PLO, Europe, Eastern Europe, Canada.
Didn't Barak put that on the table?
No, he did not.
He did not.
It is also supported by the majority of the American people. It has just been reiterated by Saudi Arabia. The U.S. has unilaterally blocked it for 25 years. What Barak put on the table, the population doesn't know this, because people like the Western media, the media in Canada and the United States don't tell them. Like, you can check and see how often you, for example, or others have reported what I just said. Don't bother checking. The answer is zero.
He's not talking about Barack Obama. He's talking about Ehud Barak, by the way, for the record. Jeffrey Epstein's personal best friend and old Israeli leader.
Proposal in Camp David in the Barak Clinton proposal. In the United States, I didn't check the Canadian media. In the United States, you cannot find a map, which is the most important thing, of course. Check in Canada and see if you can find a map. You go to Israel, you can find a map. If you go to scholarly sources, you can find a map. Here's what you find when you look at a map. You find that this generous, magnanimous proposal provided Israel with a salient east of Jerusalem, including the city of Ma'ale Adumim, which was established primarily by the Labor government in Clinton in order to bisect the West Bank. That salient goes almost to Jericho, breaks the West Bank into two cantons. Then there's a second salient to the north, going to the Israeli settlement of Ariel, which bisects the northern part into two cantons. So we've got three cantons in the West Bank, virtually separated. All three of them are separated from a small area of East Jerusalem, which is the center of Palestinian commercial and cultural life and of communication. So you got four cantons, all separated from the west, from Gaza, so that's five cantons, all surrounded by Israeli settlements, infrastructure development, and so on, which also incidentally guarantee Israel control of.
Honestly, I don't think this is very relevant about Ehud Barak. The irony, okay, I'm going to read this. This is really important for you guys to understand as well. He might be a pedophile, but he hasn't been in government for a long time, and many Israelis dislike him. He's also a lot more sympathetic to the Palestinians and the current government. He's even said Israel's heading towards apartheid. So what that guy's saying is right, okay? Like, that guy, Ehud Barak, who many were critical at the time, many anti-Zionists were critical at the time, is now literally a sympathetic figure to the, like, seen as a more sympathetic voice of the Palestinian plight, because especially under Netanyahu's leadership, Israel got significantly more brutal. Like, it's, and regardless though, like, Ehud Barak, still not sympathetic. Don't get me wrong. Like, leadership that we talk about, like, what's the dude's name? The one that got assassinated. A former prime minister like Yitzhak Rabin, like every single Israeli leader thus far, including Robin, who was genuinely like way more considered to be way more Palestinian friendly than the current leadership. Every single one of them still like literally committed purges. Okay, like this does not end up legitimizing their position. I'm just saying this so you understand like how much worse it got over time.
The water resource is the reason. Last comment. This does not rise to the level of South Africa 40 years ago, when South Africa established the Bantustans. That's the generous, magnanimous offer.
Okay.
And there's a good reason why maps weren't shown, because as soon as you look at the map, you see it.
All right. However, that's the characterization of it. But let me just say, Arafat didn't even bother putting a counter-proposal on the table.
No, that's not true.
They negotiated
That's
at
totally
Taba
false.
afterwards.
That's not true.
But I guess my question is,
That's
if
not
they
true.
don't continue to negotiate...
That's totally false. And,
That's false?
Not only is it false, but not a single participant in the meetings says it. That's a media fabrication.
That Arafat didn't put a counter-proposal on the table?
They had a proposal. They proposed the international consensus, which has been accepted by the entire world, the Arab states, the PLO, the majority of the American... Sorry. They proposed a settlement which is in accord with an overwhelming international consensus,
my question is, if
and
you
is
don't
blocked by the
talk,
United States.
The problem that people look at now, the Middle East, is they say it's spun out of control. How do you get back to...
First way we get back is by trying the experiment of...
Which has been accepted by the entire world. Where is the entire world now? When he says the entire world, when Noam Chomsky says the entire world, he means the entire world with the exception of America, okay? So just remember that. Just like the entire world right now believes Israel's occupation of the West Bank to be illegal. That's true, because it is. It is literally illegal. That occupation in the West Bank, totally illegal. But it doesn't fucking matter. Because America does not care and actually likes it. Do you understand? So when people say like the entire world feels this way, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter because that's not what the United States' point of view is.
Of minimal honesty. Okay, let's try that experiment. If we try the experiment of minimal honesty, we look at our own position and we discover what I just described, that for 25 years, the United States has blocked the political settlement, which is supported by the majority of the American population and by the entire world, except for Israel, virtually. I mean, there's some marginal exceptions. So the first thing we do is accept the honesty to look at that. We take a look at Camp David, and we see, yeah, it was the same. The United States was still demanding a Bantustan-style settlement and rejecting the overwhelming international consensus and the position of the American people. We then discover that the United States immediately moved to enhance terror in the region. So let's continue. On September 29th, Ehud Barak put a massive military presence outside the AlAqsa mosque. Very provocative. When people...
Oh, wait a minute. But this last round of conflict, wait, that's so strange. It almost feels like whenever Israel wants to piss the Palestinians off, they just put police and IDF soldiers outside of the AlAqsa mosque. Very interesting.
People came out of the mosque.
Is this interview from this year? No, this is from 20 years ago, dude. He's talking about Ehud Barak. Guys.
Young people started throwing stones. The Israeli army started shooting. Half a dozen people were killed, and it escalated. The next couple of days, there was no Palestinian fire at this time, and this is all in occupied territories. In the next couple of days, Israel used U.S. helicopters. Israel produces no helicopters. Uses U.S. helicopters to attack civilian complexes, killing about a dozen people and wounding several dozen. Clinton reacted to that on October 3rd by making the biggest deal in a decade to send Israel new military helicopters.
Wow. That sounds so strangely similar, doesn't it, to Joe Biden? Joe Biden in 2021, dude. That's wild. This has always been the American position. It doesn't matter if you have Republicans. It doesn't matter if you have Democrats. It is always the American position, okay? Literally. Oh, you're murdering Palestinians? Oh, here, let's give you some more weapons, dude.
Which had just been used for the purpose I described, and of course would continue to be. The U.S. press cooperated with that by refusing to publish the story. To this day, they have not published the fact. It continued. When Bush came in, one of his first acts was to send Israel a new shipment of the most advanced military helicopters in the arsenal. That continues right up to a couple of weeks ago with new shipments. You take a look at the reports from, say, Jenin by British correspondents like Peter Beaumont in the London Observer. He says the worst atrocity there was the Apache helicopters buzzing around, destroying and demolishing everything. Yeah, this is enhancing terror. And we may easily continue. We can take, also, let me continue. On December 15th, 14th, the Security Council.
I mean, Noam Chomsky doesn't get a lot of play on American media. Like, for a very long time, Noam Chomsky has not appeared on any, like, prominent news networks. Well, now he's like 7 million years old, so I don't even know if he would want to or could, but...
tried to pass a resolution calling for what everyone recognizes to be the obvious means for reducing terror, namely sending international monitors. That's a way of reducing terror. This happened to be in the middle of a...
Even then, this is the CBC, so it's the Canadian news, for the record.
...quiet period, which lasted for about 3 weeks. The U.S. vetoed it. 10 days before that, there was a meeting at Geneva of the high contracting parties of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which has unanimously held for 35 years that it applies to Israel. The meeting condemned the Israeli settlements as illegal, condemned a list of atrocities, willful destruction of property, murder, trials, torture, and so on and so forth.
Right, okay.
What happened to that meeting? Oh, I'll tell you what happened to that meeting. The U.S. boycotted it. Therefore, the media refused to publish it. Therefore, no one here knows that the United States once again enhanced terror by refusing to recognize the applicability of conventions which make virtually everything the United States and the Israel are doing there a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions, which means a war crime. Just a minute. These conventions were established in 1949 in order to criminalize the atrocities of the Nazis in occupied territory. They are customary international law. The United States is obligated, as a high contracting party, to prosecute violations of those conventions. That means to prosecute its own leadership for the last 25 years.